A hybrid vehicle, like we said last week, is a vehicle that combines two power sources.
Okay.
This car in front of us is a conventional car.
Okay.
It just has one power source,
Okay.
and that is the petrol or the diesel that powers the engine. But for a hybrid, you have that, which is the petrol or the diesel,
Yeah.
and then you have an electric motor, which is being assisted with the battery. So you have two power sources, which means the car can either run on fuel or run on its battery.
All right. So now I know what the car battery looks like. This is the car battery. Is this the same type of car battery I would see in a hybrid vehicle?
This is a conventional car battery, 12 volts.
Okay.
You would find this in a hybrid.
Okay.
Yes, but what they call it in the hybrid is the auxiliary battery.
Okay.
Which means it has a main battery that's doing the job. And the main battery, like I said last week, can go as far as 1,000 volts.
Wow.
That's
Okay.
pretty high.
How many volts would this be?
This
like?
is just 12 volts. This is your
Oh.
regular 12 volts battery.
So this is a really big battery you're talking
This is
about.
it's for this
the
car.
1,000
It's a
volts, I mean.
it's a
I
big
mean the
battery for
1,000
this car.
volts
And
one.
for that, it's a very big battery.
Okay.
It takes up usually the whole back seat.
Wow.
So when you're sitting in a hybrid at the back, you're actually sitting on top of the battery because the whole underneath of that seat is the battery.
Okay, that's the first difference. But what about the engine itself? This is a conventional engine we're looking at now. But how would it be different in a hybrid vehicle?
So looking at the engine, the main difference between the two engines is this is a fuel-powered engine.
Okay.
In the hybrid, you have an engine that would both accommodate fuel and accommodate the battery side of it.
Okay.
Which means that components in it, like the alternator in this one,
Yeah.
will be missing in that one.
Oh, fantastic.
You don't need an alternator for the hybrid because you have what we call the inverter and the converter doing the job of charging and adding power to the battery.
Okay, so I know that the alternator is what makes sure that the battery stays charged when the engine is on,
Yeah.
right? Now that's for a conventional vehicle.
Exactly.
So how come a hybrid vehicle doesn't need an alternator?
Like I said, the hybrids use an inverter.
Okay.
And they have a converter, which means that the battery in there, once it starts going to a certain percentage, the engine kicks up
Okay.
and starts powering the inverter to charge that battery.
Oh.
So it's doing the job of the alternator.
Okay.
You don't need an additional alternator in that. That's one of the differences between this engine and a hybrid engine. Now, another difference would be things like the water pump.
Okay.
In a hybrid engine, you usually have close to 2 water pumps because that inverter system needs to be cooled down because it gets hot very quickly.
Okay.
So you have a water pump there that's pumping that coolant around that system, and you have the regular water pump on the engine.
Okay.
If you don't do that, what will happen is the regular water pump on the engine is belt driven, which means when the engine shuts down, that water pump is not going to function.
Okay.
So the hybrid system would overheat.
So are you saying that the hybrid system doesn't use the belt function?
It doesn't use the belt function.
there are
That's
no
the entire.
belts?
No, you actually have the belt, but it doesn't power the hybrid system of the
Okay,
car.
fantastic. So this is a whole different technology completely.
Exactly.
But now I know that there are some standard things that you're supposed to check for with a hybrid engine, with a normal conventional
yeah.
engine. Are they completely different for the things for hybrid engine?
No, you have similarities.
Okay.
Like your engine oil,
Yeah.
you definitely have to have engine oil in that car too.
Okay.
So you would have the same dipstick.
Yeah.
Your radiator is going to be there. You need a radiator
Okay.
to take coolant in. You're going to have the fans. You're going to have your air filter. Those things are standard.
Okay.
To the extent you even have the injectors there too.
Beautiful.
Those are standard things. But the additional things you would have there are what I just mentioned. Take, for instance, the AC compressor. It's not belt driven like on a conventional car.
Okay.
On a hybrid, it's electric.
All right.
So you have a case where if it's belt driven, when the engine shuts down, it means you won't use your AC anymore. So they have to make it totally electric.
Okay, fantastic. So I know that there's some things inside the vehicle that we need to check out as well. You said you were going to show me
Exactly.
what those are. Please go in. I'll step around the other side.
We still have the normal shifter on a hybrid, just like this. But what is inside the gearbox is totally different.
Okay.
In a normal conventional car like this, inside the gearbox you have gears. That's actually where the name comes from, where you have a lot of gears combining together for shifting back and forth. But when it comes to a hybrid, what you have inside is an electric motor.
Okay. All right. So what about the dashboard right now?
So
is there anything I would notice on the dash that talks about,
the hybrid system?
Yes.
Exactly. What we have here, we have what you see on a normal car. You have the fuel gauge, you have the temperature gauge there, and the odometer, the speedometer, you have everything here.
Okay.
Now, on a hybrid, there are some things that you would see differently. Take, for instance, the fuel gauge. It will be there,
Okay.
but then you have an additional gauge,
Okay.
which is for the battery.
Okay.
So you want to always take note of that while you're driving. If you get to any point where you see the battery is going down, going to a certain level, and the engine doesn't cut off, that is telling you there's something significantly wrong. Because once it gets to a certain percentage, the hybrid system should cut off and the engine comes on to charge it. Then once the battery gets to another level, the engine should cut off and then the battery takes over.
Okay, so is there any point in time in a hybrid vehicle that you can use just complete battery or complete fuel engine? So is there any way you could have either or must it always work function with that battery?
It must always function. It's totally automatic. You have no control over that when it comes to switching. The car does the switching itself. If at any point it doesn't switch, then that means there's a problem.
All right.
Then one other thing a lot of people will notice, those who have driven hybrid cars would notice that there's usually a ready button, a ready light, that shows when you turn the engine on.
Okay.
So take, for instance, this was a hybrid car and I get in and I turn it and I start like that. You're not going to hear that at first.
Oh.
That engine sound, you won't hear it.
Amazing.
In fact, a lot of people who drive hybrids for the very first time get confused because they've turned it and they're not hearing the engine make that sound.
Okay.
But if you put the car in drive, it will keep moving.
Amazing.
That's because it starts up with the battery. Now, along the way you're driving, you just hear the engine pick on its own.
Yeah.
I've seen people who get scared with that because they're like, my engine just started, my engine just went off. But that's the way a hybrid works.
Okay, so I'm thinking it must be really fuel efficient working with a hybrid vehicle, but the charging points for hybrid vehicles, so for instance, I see hybrid vehicles as kind of like semi-electric cars. Is there any way to charge it apart from the engine being on?
No, there's no other way.
Not at all?
Not at all.
Okay.
The only time you get to start charging cars is when you move to totally electric cars.
All
and
right.
yes, they're very fuel efficient.